All right, welcome to the Hey Friend podcast, a podcast that's all about helping you pursue real friendships. The real friendships that point you more to Jesus. That's what we're all about. We're not created to be alone. We're created to be in community with friends. So, let's get to it.
Let's do it.
Wow, that was a lot.
That was so dramatic. We're now in a Christopher Nolan movie.
Wow, we want you guys to see our fun side. We're always having hard conversations.
Yeah.
So, we want you to see the fun side a little bit. Ben, what are we talking about today?
So we today are going to address a really practical issue, the issue of, how do I start a conversation with a stranger? Because there's been plenty of times where, you might end up at a new job. Most of you have had experiences like this. Maybe a new job, maybe it's a new school, maybe it's you move to a new town, and you want to make some new friends. Or at least you have the idea that you probably should make some new friends, depending on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, might shape your expectations there. But we all need friends, right? And if you're in a new place and you don't know people, you want to be able to develop connections. And you can't make new friends if you can't start a conversation. And honestly, that can be hard sometimes. I'm pretty extroverted. I believe you're fairly extroverted as well. So we're probably a little bit more, if you're an extrovert, it's a little bit easier to initiate conversation with someone. But just because I'm extroverted, just because you are, doesn't mean that's always easy. There's been plenty of times where I've been in scenarios or been in a mood or whatever where I didn't feel like initiating conversation with someone I don't know. So what we're going to do in this, we're going to kind of set up some of the context, a little bit of backstory, what prevents it, what makes it hard for people to start conversations with strangers. Talk a little bit about some biblical grounding, some science behind that, and then we're going to break down into 9 really simple steps. Here's how you can start a conversation with a stranger. So hopefully this will be helpful for you if this is something that you feel like, oh man, this is challenging. How do I do this? Because one of the realities is when something's difficult, it oftentimes gets a lot easier when you break it down into really small pieces. So that's the plan for today.
Yep. And this is one of the ways that we can help you to go first.
Yes.
You got to pick up the scalpel one day. So
Yeah. So Lucas, give me a scenario of a time, big or small, where you felt like, oh man, I don't feel like starting a conversation. Or I feel uncomfortable. I feel nervous about initiating conversation with someone else. Has there ever been a time for you like that?
Not too many of those times, but the times that I do remember is times that are just like, it's weird. Like, whether it's meeting someone that's, 50 years older than me.
Yeah.
And try to have a conversation, or someone that's like not having it, they're like, something's going on with them and they don't want to talk to you at all. And it's like awkward and it's weird and it's, I felt fine. There's times that, I don't say anything, or I don't go on my way to meet someone new. There's been times like that. And can I recall exactly every moment that happened? I don't know. But the times that I've tried to have a conversation with someone, and it's someone that was older than me, and it was just weird. The reason why it was weird is because they're not having that day of they didn't want to talk to anyone.
They weren't reciprocating.
Yeah, and you just stand there and you just look at each other, and
Totally.
So like that's hopefully that.
Which I think that's everyone's fear when they're like, oh, I don't feel comfortable starting a conversation with
But
someone.
most of the time it's not that though.
Yeah.
So I think that one incident or that time that happened multiple times. I mean, it could be twice or 3 times, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That one incident is not equivalent to all the other good times that I've interacted with someone that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And what that led to that relationship was amazing. So
I can think of even just this last week, my wife and I got to get away for a weekend, visited my grandma in Southern California, and went to a concert with her at a church there, just something she had seen in the paper and wanted to go to. So we went to it. And it was fun, but I was sitting next to someone, older lady came in and sat down next to us. And I'm usually pretty open to starting conversation with people. But I was talking with, I think my wife or my grandma, who were sitting on my right side. This lady sat down, a little ways away from me on the left side. and was going to initiate conversation, but she didn't really make eye contact. It was kind of like, I was like, okay, maybe she doesn't really want to, and I don't need to start a conversation with this person. I'm here with other people. But it went long enough where it was like, okay, now it's awkward to start a conversation now because we've been sitting next to each other, kind of like not acknowledging each other. And I finally, at the intermission, there was a good like kind of moment where I initiated conversation with her, and we ended up having a good chat for the 5 or 6 minutes or whatever, where that the intermission went. But that was a recent example of a time where I was like, oh, this is awkward to like, I feel weird starting a conversation, which is not something I normally feel. But I think here's the reality. I have a job. One of my many roles that I do is workplace chaplaincy, maybe is one way of saying it. I get basically paid to talk with employees and hear how they're doing, be a listening ear if they need it. So I'm quite literally paid to walk up to people I don't know and talk with them, initiate conversation, and just kind of see where it goes. And there's plenty of times, like even though that's my job, I'm comfortable with it, where I'm like, I don't really feel like that today, and I kind of have to like psych myself up as I'm going into the building to be like, all right, I got to get in the zone for this. So all that to say, it's if you're someone who feels uncomfortable starting a conversation with a stranger, there's plenty of other people who feel that way.
Yeah,
even the most extroverted of people encounter that with some regularity.
And if it's awkward, it's okay.
Yeah.
Don't make too much out of it. And like we both talked about older people that we've talked to, but if you like talk to my grandpa, he can talk to anyone.
Yeah.
And you can have an amazing, he'll have a conversation with anyone, you know? So it's not true that all older people don't want to have a conversation with you, but there's few, and whether that's old or young, whatever, it's just sometimes they don't want to talk to you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I tend to find when in those, like as I reflected in getting ready for this episode on the moments where I feel like, oh, I don't feel comfortable initiating conversation with this person I don't know. Usually that's because I'm primarily thinking about myself. I'm analyzing myself, evaluating like, oh, what is this other person going to think of me? And I think sometimes when I'm doing that, you can kind of argue like, oh, I'm being selfless. I'm actually thinking about them. I'm trying to evaluate whether or not they are going to feel good talking to me. But I think if we're honest, in moments like that, you're actually more focused on yourself than you are focused on the other person.
They did this study in 2018. The study really looked at your first impression towards meeting someone new.
Yeah.
It was called the liking gap, right? And we assume that when you meet someone new, that they don't like you, but it's actually not true. They might like you more than you think. We apply, I was telling this to Ben earlier. For me, it's like, when we're editing these videos and I look at the video and I say something, it's like, I don't like that. But that's from my perspective.
I made a weird facial expression or whatever. Yeah.
My own perspective. And I apply that towards meeting someone new sometimes. It doesn't work out the same way, So like, if you think when you meet someone new, they don't like you, you're probably are wrong. That's what the study showed, that they're most likely they like you more than you think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that again, that comes back to your self-analyzing. You're more focused on yourself than you are on the other person. Yeah. And I think that study also talks about the reality that we tend, just like regardless of the type of person you are, we tend to not do a great job at accurately judging other people's opinions of us.
Yeah. And when you meet them for the first time, we think we know it all, but we don't really. And I think the other side of just like the labels, like you said, you're extrovert, right?
Yeah.
And there's people that are introvert, and we use the labels from stopping us to meet new people. Don't let the labels, or don't let the things that you're comfortable with let you stop from meeting someone new.
Yeah. Don't get too stuck in that rut. Another interesting thing we came across in prepping for this was I had read a couple of years ago an article in The Atlantic where they were kind of surveying this whole series of studies. Varying scientists had done a number of studies on the effects on people's moods that come from starting conversations with strangers. So a whole bunch of different stuff I could mention here. I actually saved some, like highlighted some of this stuff and saved it. So there was one of the studies was they just had people on the bus. they had however many participants and said, hey, while on public transport, start a conversation with X number of strangers. And then they measured how people did and like what that experience was like. And I thought this was super interesting. On average, conversations lasted a whopping 14.2 minutes, and the talkers overwhelmingly liked the strangers they'd spoken with. People of all personality types had a good time. So whether you were introverted or extroverted, when they were participating in the study and were therefore required to go, hey, start a conversation with a stranger on public transport. Not only did the conversations go way longer than you'd think, normally you'd think that that'd be like a 30-second conversation. The people of all personality types had a good time. There was another study that they mentioned in the same article, talking about how they got together a group of people continuing to study this question of what's the emotional impact of starting conversation with strangers, and did basically like a scavenger hunt. They had a bunch of people, gave them this app. Each day it would give them like talk to a person who's wearing a blue shirt or that kind of thing. So they'd get a list of here's a type of person to initiate conversation with, and had a whole bunch of conversations over a period of time. So I'll just read this is a highlight from the article. Participants found it was much easier to start and maintain a conversation with a stranger, and the conversations lasted 3 times longer than they predicted. About 80% that said that they learned something new, 41% said they exchanged contact information with someone. Some participants made friends, went on dates, got coffee, and true to Sandstrom, that's the scientist's prediction, their pessimism about the prospect of talking with strangers was eased. A week after completing the scavenger hunt, participants were more confident of their conversational abilities and less afraid of rejection. So like overall, again, regardless of their personality type, whether they're introverted or extroverted, they saw significant positive effects of stepping out of their comfort zones, talking with strangers. We got the dog in the background playing with the chew toy.
And now also let's look at it from a biblical perspective, right? Genesis. Second Genesis talks about how it's not good for man to be alone.
Yeah.
And now let's just look at even in John 13, Jesus taught, he's like, I tell you this new command I give you, love one another as I loved you. So you must love one another. Mm-hmm. Then he added, by this, everyone will know you are my disciples if you love one another. If you are a Christian, if you are a follower of Christ, when it said love one another, it's not always about you. It's about that other person. Yeah. And ask the question, it's like, okay, what does this really mean? What does love, love one another mean? Well, you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13, love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no no records of wrongs. Mm-hmm. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects. It always trusts. It always hopes, and always perseveres. Love never fails. This is how we ought to love someone else.
Yeah. It can be a hugely loving action to initiate conversation with someone, and hopefully it'll be beneficial for you as well. Like if you're in that scenario that we're talking about, you're new to town, new to the school, new to whatever. Not only will you having a conversation with someone you don't know encourage them, hopefully bless them, it might also open up some opportunities for you to make some real friends.
Yeah, beautiful things happen when you try to experience one of the joys of meeting someone new or hearing someone's story, because you can find some certain things. Hey, I can relate to that. I struggled with that. Or, hey, this happened to me. Hey, you do this. This is pretty cool. I'm actually I want to do that. Like, you never know what someone else is going through. Or you never know just the kindness that how you can be. Just with your smile, you go up to someone and they're having a bad day, and that just makes their day. Or you say something nice to them, or you listen to them, or they feel like they are seen. They don't feel small. Like what that can do to someone. And it's a beautiful thing. And that, again, that's one of the ways we can do. But we have to start taking that step toward that.
Yeah.
So
So let's get granular and break it down into what are some specific things you can do to initiate that. And you kind of alluded to the first one, I think, that we tend to not think about. The first step, I would say, in starting a conversation with a stranger is going to be making eye contact. In general, there's going to be exceptions to this, but in general, you're not going to start a conversation with someone you haven't made eye contact with. So pro tip, and I think this is a huge one, particularly for people if you're, in the college age, kind of post-college stage of life, look up, don't walk around staring at your phone or take off the headphones, and look around at the people who are with you. If you're in it feels safe and secure to be protected by having headphones on and have your phone in your hand. Not gonna lie, that you feel safer doing that, particularly if you're in a new spot with new people, you feel uncomfortable. That's gonna make you feel more comfortable because that's what our phones and our brains have trained us to do. It's, this is my security device. I can go to whatever app and people look at me and they say, oh, look, that guy's not alone. He's busy with his phone. He has purpose and meaning. Yeah. When in reality, you're probably just dodging the discomfort of not knowing people.
Have you done that? I mean, I've done that.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes when I don't want to talk to anyone or when I'm like, I need to get stuff done, I put my headphones on,
And it's not an inherently bad thing, right? There's times where, like, if I'm in a coffee shop, I'm going to put on my headphones because I need to focus. But if you're in a context where, I'll say it this way, let's say it's your first day at a new school, at a new job, whatever. I would encourage you, do that first day without blocking yourself off from the world and just see what connections develop. So that's step number one. Start with eye contact and smile. So like when you're walking around, look up at people, take off the headphones. And I'm getting a spam call. I thought I put my phone on mute.
That seems so like if I'm listening, I hear that. That just seems so simple. Like you're telling me to smile. Like I don't know how to smile. When you're telling me to look, you don't think I'm looking, I'm talking to someone, But to be honest, we're not doing that. We're all so focused on ourselves, what's going on with us, with work, with school, it's all about us. And we're training ourselves to do that. This teaches you to actually turn that around.
Totally.
Look at the person that's in front of you.
I mean, I was just, like I mentioned, I was in Southern California, San Diego area last weekend. And one of the things my wife and I did, we went to a big park in San Diego called Balboa Park, beautiful nature area. And it was a Saturday morning. It was one of the nicest days they'd had so far, a ton of people out. And I'm just guessing a percentage here, but I would say 80-ish% of the people who were there were outside sitting on their phones.
I see that at coffee shops a lot too.
Yeah.
Like I saw these, it was a mother and her son. They get coffee. They sit down and the son goes on his phone and the mom goes on her phone. Yeah. And they're just looking at their phones and they're sitting there for 40 minutes. I'm like, that kind of like hurt a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
They had no conversation. They just drink their coffee on their phone. I was like,
Yeah.
And we do that across all types of relationships.
Totally. Yeah. So number one, make eye contact, smile. That's going to be a great way to start a conversation. Number two, I'd say, is get your mindset right. Note that both of these things are starting with you. They're not dependent on the other person. Get your mindset right. So get the focus off yourself. Quit analyzing, are they going to like me? How am I doing? Do I look good enough? I'm going to be awkward in this conversation. And another piece of that is take the pressure off yourself by setting a realistic goal for the conversation, right? It might be that a realistic goal in a certain scenario would be just, hey, I want to get to know this person's name.
Yeah.
Or it might be, man, I want to have a 60-second conversation. Or maybe the win is purely I initiated a conversation with someone. Like if you are anxious and that makes you nervous, the thought of going into a space where you don't know people and initiating conversation with someone, maybe your mental win should be, hey, today at class or today during this shift, I want to start conversation with 2 people that I don't know. And that's it. That's all. That's the only thing I need to accomplish. Yeah. And that's great. Get your mindset right, which is going to be a huge help for you.
Oh, there's a dog right there.
Pup wants to join the podcast.
Sorry about that.
It's got commentary.
Yeah. Well, it's my turn now, huh? So the third thing is ask a question, Yeah. It can be a simple question of just like, hey, what are you reading? Hey, what are you listening? Yeah. Hey, what kind of shoes are those? Hey, even like that's a sick coat. What kind of coat is that? You know, it's like just a small question. It doesn't have to be something crazy, you know.
Yeah.
And if you can find something like I use this a lot for me. Like if someone is doing something that I'm interested in, like whether it's reading the scriptures or whether it's reading a certain book that I've read before, how are you liking that book? You know, I'm just like kind of like
connection
I
point.
can kind of relate with them a little bit because I've read that book too. You know, so how are you liking it? You know, so I have the same shoes. You know, just ask a question that can start a conversation or that can lead to somewhere.
Yeah.
And with that though too, as soon as you ask the question, listen. Don't listen and reply at the same time. Just listen fully.
That's
right?
important.
Just really just listen, right? And don't worry about the next question or anything like that. Just listen to them. And as you listen to them, what's going to happen is something's going to pop up and there'll be a question right there, you know? But we live in a world that we're so focused about not listening, just replying, you know? We're so focused about like not even hearing what they said, and we want to find out more about whatever it's in our head instead of listening to what situation that we're in or what they're saying, you know? So listen. So the reason I just said, ask a question, make sure you listen fully, don't listen and reply, and ask a follow-up question.
Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes that follow-up question is going to be a great determiner kind of whether or not the conversation is going to go further. Like plenty of people are more than happy to have that initial, like, oh, thank you for that nice comment, or like, I like your hair, or whatever stuff that you were saying. So when you ask that follow-up question, I think we need to also, as you go into a conversation with a stranger, be okay with some silence. We tend to, the moment the conversation kind of drags a little bit or feels like it's not moving forward, like, oh no, the end is nigh, I've done something wrong, they dislike me, we assume. And oftentimes it might just be purely because that other person is thinking in response to your question, or it may be that it may be that they don't want to have the conversation. So you can pick up on that, but be okay with at least a few seconds of silence in a conversation. Because if you can't handle that, you're putting too much pressure on yourself if you feel like there needs to be constant noise.
Sometimes silence is, I feel that 100%. Like sometimes it's just weird, you know? It's like just like saying nothing. You're just looking at each other, but that's not a bad thing. You know, we're used to when something is silent, something is wrong. No, that's not true.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And then in response to that, right, if there's the silence is extending, it may be a good moment for you as the person who initiated the conversation to share something, right? You don't want it to feel like an interrogation of the other person, you asking questions and just drawing information out of them. You also want to contribute. So you can also respond by sharing something about yourself openly, honestly. Generally, if I'm initiating conversation with someone, though, I want to know that I've asked them at least 2 questions before I start talking about myself.
Yeah. And this is a moment for you to lead with vulnerability, to lead with honesty, to lead with just something the Lord might be teaching you that He wants you to share with this person, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes the Lord wants us to have a conversation with someone that we don't know. And as you ask the questions, the Holy Spirit prompts this thing that He wants you to say. And I think those are moments that you can lead how the rest of the conversation is going to go.
Totally. So. Yeah. And it may be at this point where you just feel like, man, this conversation isn't going anywhere. And the reality is that's okay. It's okay if it was you asked them a question, you had 60 seconds, 2 minutes of back and forth. That's all right if that's the end point.
Yeah.
But ideally it's not.
Yeah.
Right. Which then leads to the next thing that we want to see.
And if there's something there, I'd be like, man, if the conversation just like went smoothly and there's something there, invite them to do something. A follow-up of just like, hey, let's get coffee. I loved our conversation, and I want to continue this conversation. Do you want to get coffee next week? Hey, my friends and I are having this event. Would you want to join us, right? And especially if someone's saying, as you have the conversation, and they want to make more friends. They sound like they want to make more friends. Like if there's an event that you're going to, invite them, right?
Yeah.
And I've done that multiple times. We had our Christmas party here this year at my house, and I met this gentleman at a coffee shop, and he was dope, man.
Yeah.
He's dope. And he we had a great conversation, and he just moved into town, and I was like, hey, we're having a Christmas party. Do you want to come? You should come, you know?
Nice.
And
Love it.
no one here knew him, but he met all my friends
Yeah.
here, and they're like, oh, how did you meet Lucas? We just met at a coffee shop, right?
That's fun.
It just, that led to something beautiful. And now we're still friends, you know, and he's a YouTuber too. And he's been pretty awesome
Nice.
getting to know him. So you never know where it leads
Yeah.
to, you know, just ask for that. What I'm saying is like, if there's something, have coffee with that person if at that time allows, or if there's something that's happening in your life, invite them into it, you know, a little bit, and just like thank them for the conversation. Really, thanks for just taking the time. You might, we're all so busy. We all have a lot of things going on. That's an opportunity that you can give gratitude. It's like, hey, it was really nice getting to know you. I had an amazing conversation, and again, I want to continue this conversation. And sometimes the North Dakota goodbyes never stops. It's like, goodbye. You say goodbye like 8 times.
Yeah.
Just end it there. It's like, hey, let's maybe as you thank them, just find a date, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And the conversation. Yeah, so.
And it's okay too. I think, you know, there's been instances that I've had similar to what you're saying, where it's like, okay, I feel like I'm really connecting with this person. Let's take it let's meet. Let's set another time to get together. There might be other times where you're like, you know, this conversation didn't go quite far enough where I feel like, okay, we can initiate some sort of connection outside, but it might be the kind of thing, particularly if it's someone who you know you're going to see again, like if it's a coworker or if it's in the class context or something like that. It's enough to say, maybe the way you end that conversation is saying, you know, see you next time. And in your mind, you're saying, next time I want to have a little bit deeper of a conversation with them. And it might be 2 or 3 small, short conversations before you get to the point where you're going to invite them to something. And that's totally fine. I don't think the goal is not necessarily to end the conversation with a date on the calendar, though. If that happens, awesome.
You know, you have to get to a point of just, again, taking that step, you know, and this is one of the ways that you can take that step.
Exactly.
Of making
initiate it.
Yeah, absolutely. How can people go deeper, Ben?
So there's a couple great things out there. I would say I'll do 3 recommendations. One, the book The 6 Conversations by Heather Hollerman has some great content in it. I believe it's Hollerman. We could double check that. Has some great content in it, both in the mindset side of things and in like some specific practical 6 types of conversations you can have with people. We'll probably in a future podcast episode dig a little bit deeper into that and kind of overview some of the stuff she says there, but would highly recommend that book if you're like, man, I want to get better at conversations. You can look up both The Liking Gap, whether that's on YouTube or Google it.
You can YouTube it.
And then we can also include the link in show notes to the article from The Atlantic that has a bunch of great stuff. And obviously in future episodes, we're going to talk more about stuff along these lines if you want to keep going deeper into friendship. So I think that's about all we got time for.
Let's go. All right, friend. We love you. Go first. It's okay if all of your conversations don't go well. That's okay. Just continue to keep having those conversations. And we hope that you find someone that, you know, knows Jesus, someone that can point you more to Jesus. In this life, we need people around us. We need to walk with others, with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And thank you for listening today. And go follow Jesus and have an amazing day. We'll see you next week.
Peace.
Hey friend, Lucas here. Just wanted to say thank you for listening to this episode. If this was helpful to you, all we ask is to leave a review on our Spotify account, or if you're listening on YouTube, just subscribe to our channel. And we're super grateful for you. Our mission is to seek the one that's alone, the one that's hurting, and we want to bring community and friendship, and we want you to go first. We love you. Follow Jesus more today, and we'll see you next week.